So I wanted to talk a little bit about fighting games. The Marvel Tokon closed beta happened this weekend, and I was fortunate enough, and I don't know how fortunate it is because I feel like after the original round they kind of just threw a code out to everybody maybe. Um, but I was fortunate enough to play in it a little bit, and I had a good time. But there were some things I wanted to talk about on the beta, and I've had some thoughts rolling around in my head past couple months because fighting games have always been kind of a contentious topic, and there's always thoughts about like why aren't fighting games more popular? Why do fighting games seem harder to approach? Why do people not want to get into them? Why do people think that they're harder? Things like this. And I have a lot of personal experience with this because recently I've spent years trying to convince my friends to try fighting games. I just trying to tell them like, look, this is different. This is not what you've used to. You spent your whole life playing first person shooters. That's all you play today. There's a hurdle you got to get over to learn this new skill set. But once you do, like it's a universal skill set. Okay. And then you can apply it to a lot of things and it makes the whole genre more approachable. But one thing that I get back from a lot of them, or I did really, the main retort was, yeah, I could play these games and I get what you like about them, but they just feel like work to me, right? When I tell them like you get the concepts, I've taught you the basics, you get the concepts. I think you just need to spend a little bit of time playing on your own, you know, learning your combos, memorizing your buttons, right? Just a little bit of time on your own practicing, not directly fighting me, not trying to beat me, right? Not getting punched in the dick, as they like to say. They think that all I did was bully them, punch them in the dick, and that I got pleasure out of it, right? But to them, that was work. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to come home after whatever. They whine about their hard white collar jobs, right? And they didn't want to come home and do hard work of learning a single player fighting game, or spending time in the lab, or just playing on their own in story mode or arcade mode or whatever it would be to get a better understanding of a fighting game. And I think really that's at the heart of why fighting games are less approachable. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of factors, and one of them is definitely the accountability factor. If you're playing any kind of team game, especially with your friends, especially with not your friends, when there's strangers involved, if you lose or if you do badly, you can blame it on other people. But when it is just you and you do badly, you lose, it is difficult to attribute blame elsewhere. You either blame the other person or you blame yourself. And for those of us who play fighting games, we're really good at blaming the other person, right? That person's a piece of shit. They have the worst tactics. They're playing a cheap character. They're carried, right? All these things, okay? But I think when you're not as good or when you're not involved in the genre, you probably default to thinking, wow, I'm really bad at this, or like, wow, this is really hard. Not even necessarily attributing blame, but just thinking, wow, this is really hard because it is new and it is different. And because fighting games, historically and even still today, do not do a good job of onboarding people. I think that fighting games have come a long way in terms of onboarding people, but they still do a really bad job of it. And I'm speaking to this as another problem I think is relevant to voice here. And I think I have something unique to offer here. Another issue is that often when you hear people speaking on this topic, like most content creators on YouTube who talk about this topic are like professional fighting game players, okay? They might not necessarily go out and win Evo or other big tournaments, but almost all of them compete in some kind of tournament, online or local, right? You think about Sajam, you think about Diaphone, you think about Maximilian. These are content creators. These people have sponsorship deals. They know people at these companies. They have been going to tournaments. They've been playing fighting games forever. Okay. They're professionals. And when you look at their stats in game, they are master rank players across the board. They may be grandmasters. They may be legends. Okay. We're talking about 1% of the player base in these games. And that's the primary perspective that you hear online when you talk about these things. And then obviously you hear a lot of people who are not fighting game players talking about why they don't like fighting games. And then the conflict is often, and this is how I've approached it, is, well, if you just learned a little bit about it, maybe if you knew more about it, maybe you'd like it more because we're assuming those people don't know anything about fighting games. So it's difficult to have a communication between the two sides, the absolute experts in the field and the people who know nothing about the field, right? I would consider myself an intermediate player, right? So I've been playing fighting games for, I don't know, maybe 10 years now. I started really when I was in college, basically. My first experience with fighting games was basically like Street Fighter 4 in high school, because I'm only 30, and I thought Street Fighter 4 was really fucking hard, and Street Fighter 4 is still really hard. If you go back and play Street Fighter 4 today, I mean, that was before they added like the input buffer to help you land like one frame links, and they basically took out one frame links. Street Fighter 4 still had a lot of really old design decisions that have pretty much since disappeared from the industry or from the genre. Um, but so by comparison, that game was really hard. And I remember trying to do it, and I was like, wow, this is really hard. Wow, I'm really bad at this. And I didn't like it very much. And I guess it really wasn't until Fighter Z around that time when I really started to play online competitively. I had dabbled on and off with different games up until that point, but Fighter Z and like Street Fighter 6 was really when I dove in recently. And now I'm playing a lot of Guilty Gear, a lot of Street Fighter primarily. And like right now in Street Fighter 6, I'm Diamond 1 basically. But I keep getting kicked out of Diamond 1 because the ranking system in Street Fighter 6 is S, okay? So every time I get to Diamond 1, I end up fighting the fucking alt account masters and shit, There's 50% of the people in Platinum really don't deserve to be in Platinum and don't stand a chance against someone like me. And the other half of people in Platinum don't belong in Platinum, don't deserve to be there, and I don't stand a chance against them, okay? Against someone like me, right? So that's the problem with Street Fighter 6 ranking. But right now I'm a Diamond 1 player in Street Fighter 6. And I don't really have too much of a rank in Guilty Gear. I happen to play Silver, picking up Lucy without much practice, but I think I'm okay at Guilty Gear. But one obstacle that I have faced, especially in the Street Fighter journey and trying to get out of Platinum and trying to advance to Master, because that is a goal of mine, is the fact that even for me, as someone who likes this genre and has spent a lot of time playing this genre and wants to get better, just for my own sake, just because I find it fun, even I now have found myself saying, this feels like work. And this is a reason I fell off of Fighter Z. Now, I fell off of Fighter Z for a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons was that once you got to a certain rank in Fighter Z, I think the game stopped being about your own skill and it just became like a knowledge check. And that's every fighting game, but especially in Fighter Z when there's like 50 characters on teams of 3 with all kinds of wild combinations and like, oh, well, this might be the character's block string, and this might be when it's safe to attack the character, but oh, this character pulled in their assist. And so now actually the whole thing is get complicated. And so it's like, what, 50 to the 50th power of possible variants you need to deal with? It just became too much, right? So Street Fighter is that to a less extent now, where I have to know a lot about every individual character's capabilities, and especially because I play Cammy. So, classic fighting game take here. Not a lot of people like to hear this, okay, especially for Cammy, but Cammy is a fair and honest character, okay, that has to work for her victories, okay? I don't get to bullshit my way across neutral, skip neutral with like, these pseudo-invincible EX neutral skip lariats that half the cast has, okay? That makes me plus on block, safe on block. I don't get any of that shit. If I do any of my special moves, I get anti-aired instantly. I get punched out of the sky. I have to actually play the game, okay? So I have to know like a lot. And that's a lot of work to basically tell myself, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to study super combo. Or I'm going to sit down and I'm going to lab out all of these characters like neutral ranges. Like I'm going to see exactly how my neutral range compares to like Akuma or compares to M. Bison. Okay. And that's just one variable here. I mean, yeah, the knowledge check is very important, but there is still, I acknowledge, especially with Cammy, there's way more that I need to learn and to master with my character. That's a whole nother dimension to this. I do okay, but I still can't remember all of my Oki all the time because I have a lot of options. There's a lot of things at any given moment that I could do and I need to account for. That's just a lot of sheer memorization that I need to be able to practice and recall in a stressful moment that is fighting against any of these like crazy Shotos, especially like Ken and Akuma. Okay. Um, and the challenge really has become that as someone who likes to play a lot of games and even just a lot of different fighting games, like I do currently play Street Fighter, I play Guilty Gear, and when Tokon comes out, I plan to play Tokon, right? And if, people are talking about Injustice 3, if that comes out, I'd be interested. Yeah, we'll see about Injustice 3, right? But it's difficult to find the time to justify spending in the lab, right? Because like I said, where I am in Platinum, I'm basically gambling every time I find an opponent on Platinum. This happened just tonight. I played it for about an hour tonight. Okay. I think I had 5 matches. 4 of my matches, I stomped out the other people in Platinum. I'm Platinum 5 now, on my way to Diamond 1 again. I stomped out 4 of the 5 people that I matched with. No diff at all. I like double perfected the last guy. Okay. And these people are not running it back at all. Right. But the one guy that I fought, he stomped me out. I couldn't do anything. Right. Some of these people that I fight, I'm not even trying. I'm playing the game, but I'm not doing anything special. I'm just pressing buttons. And it seems as if every button that I press is the correct button to press. And other people that I fight, it doesn't matter what I do. And I've done this against a number of like actual master ranked players. Okay. I fought a lot of master ranked players online. I have a number of like, people in Discord servers that I've played with that are master rank or of similar skill, because master rank doesn't necessarily mean anything and it means different things game to game. But people who are of that skill caliber. And I have fought against these people. Like I've done like 100 sets against them. Okay. And in most of these cases, I can eke out maybe 5 victories in 100 sets. Okay. As I'm able to like learn and adapt. But the skill differential is like so substantial that there really isn't anything I can do just fighting them. It's impossible to adapt to them in the fight. I would need to go to the lab and like there's something I need to learn. There's just a fundamental gap in our skills and abilities there. And I'm having this experience. Again, I've fought masters, and maybe they've just blown smoke up my ass, but these people have told me, hey, actually, you're not bad. You did pretty good, right? Getting my ass kicked 95-5, right? And then I'll have like that same experience of feeling as if my opponent is psychic, and no matter what button I press, I am wrong. I'll have that same experience fighting people who are supposedly my rank in Street Fighter. Now, you can blame Street Fighter 6 for that specifically, maybe, because of its bad matchmaking. But also, you look at something like Guilty Gear, right? That's also, up until just recently, had like universally hated matchmaking online system. Only now does it have a rank system. Whether or not people like it and think it is good remains to be seen. Like historically, fighting games don't have great matchmaking systems, right? They have a really hard time placing people in appropriate skill brackets. And even then, people have arguments about whether or not people should remain in a skill bracket or if they should be kicked out of a skill bracket based on losses or based on time or based on XYZ factors, or whether or not there's too many people in XYZ rank. Personally, I think that there's a problem when I think it's 50 or 60% of the player base in Street Fighter 6 is in platinum rank. That's way too many fucking people in platinum. Why are so many people in platinum? That's insane. Like, what does that mean? Is platinum supposed to suggest that that's the average skill of the player base? Because I really don't think that it is, right? So fighting games have this massive skill differential. I mean, obviously at every level, between someone who knows something and somebody who knows a little bit and somebody who knows a moderate amount, somebody who knows a lot, and then the professionals, there's these massive skill differentials. And again, there's nobody you can blame. If you lose, I mean, it really is just up to you. Like I'm over here talking shit on these opponents, but really it just comes down to I haven't spent enough time in the lab or doing whatever I need to do to get where they are. But then the question becomes, why would I do that? What is the point? And for some people, they can't find the answer within themselves to even begin playing fighting games. And that's the problem. And part of it is that, again, the onboarding is not very good. So with Tokon, I was surprised when I booted up Tokon and there was like a legitimately 30-minute long tutorial battle. And what surprised me the most was that certain parts of it ran itself back. It just flipped the side of the screen you were on. So you had to do all the same things you just did again, but now you're on the opposite side of the screen. And now look, I get that if someone's brand new to fighting games, that is kind of important information to convey to somebody. But that tutorial was legitimately like 30 minutes long. And I didn't even play the beta until the next day. I woke up the morning after it started with a code in my email, okay? And apparently, when the beta released at first, that was not optional. Every time you booted up the beta, you had to play that. That's crazy, right? 30 minutes straight of a tutorial, a text-based tutorial like that is too much information to dump on somebody right away. Because I got to tell you, even as somebody who's played fighting games, a lot of the shit they told me just went out the window. I mean, especially because it's a beta and I didn't have the ability to go into like a practice mode and get comfortable with my character. I'm just thrown into the weeds. But I didn't retain basically any of that information, especially because of some of the oddities about Tokon, like how you do special moves with 2 attack buttons. I thought super moves rather. I thought that was a little odd. I didn't retain a lot of that information. And I've played fighting games. And I've played similar fighting games by Arxis, right? I played Fighters. I played Guilty Gear. So I knew what to expect sort of going in. And yet, I still didn't really get everything right away, right? And I can't imagine how a new person would feel going into that. So it's not surprising then that people just mashed auto combo the whole time. It's not surprising that something like auto combo is so predominant in a lot of modern fighting games. And I think that the propensity to move toward like these new modern controls and simple inputs, I think is the wrong choice. Now, I know that they're really popular, and I know that some people defend them, and I know that they can be, from an accessibility standpoint, perhaps like a universal good. But aside from the accessibility perspective, and even then I have doubts because legitimately there have been people who are blind, who do not have the use of their hands. There have been people of all kinds of conditions playing fighting games for decades. Okay, so even from the accessibility perspective, I question its true necessity, but I get that it has some validity there. Okay. I don't think that adding simple inputs to a fighting game is the correct approach. That's basically the Mortal Kombat fatality popcorn approach to this. Yeah, sure. You might get more people in the door if all they have to do is press X and cool flashy shit happens. But guess what? That's how arena fighting games work. That's how like shallow, shitty mobile games and other bullshit works. There's no retention there. You're not going to draw people in and keep them based on that alone. You might, sure, you always retain a certain amount of people, but it's not really fixing the problem. The problem is that fighting games don't, and arguably maybe can't really convey the truly essential information in a way that is fun, right? So like, Guilty Gear, I think, is a particularly bad example of this because it didn't even come out with like a frame, with any kind of frame information. It's not a fair comparison necessarily that Street Fighter 6 had that frame bar, but it didn't come out with any frame information at all. This is shit that needs to be in every fighting game by default. Now, thankfully, yeah, now it is. It didn't used to be, okay? That's one level of accessibility we've reached. But I think in addition to this, it didn't have like combo trials. And I think combo trials are a good sort of prototype of what fighting games need to have. And like a mission mode. Guilty Gear has sort of a mission mode in there, although I think Guilty Gear's implementation is a little bit confusing. But I think that it's really important for fighting games to have single player content that is fun and does not feel like work, but that does genuinely and like intuitively convey really critical information about the complexity of its systems and how its actual online competitive space works. And I don't think that a lot of these do this, because a lot of these tutorials feel like work. I mean, you go into the character guides of Street Fighter, and yeah, sure, Street Fighter 6 will tell you like the theory of your moves, but it's up to you to really kind of figure out and apply that theory. And if you're experienced, maybe that's easier said than done. But again, if you're a new person, that theory is meaningless to you. You're going to read these descriptions, you're going to learn these words, Oki, wake up, reversal, all this shit. And what does it mean to you ultimately? Not very much. I don't think they do a good job of conveying that information in a practical sense. And I think that they should. There needs to be like a mission mode or a story mode or something where there are practical lessons built in that don't actually feel like lessons. They don't feel like work. They don't feel like you're learning. They're just expansive tutorials that teach you how to apply these complicated concepts in actual situations. Now, again, you can't ever really replicate the complexity of like human behavior. Although Street Fighter now seems to be doing pretty well with this, this, I can't remember what it's called, but you record yourself like a ghost, basically. A lot of people think that that's really good. And so maybe they've made some advances in AI and how it behaves. And that would be great if you can get the AI to behave more like a person, less like a cheating bot that reads your inputs. But that's what we really need, is that kind of accessible mode. And NetherRealm has had like sort of their finger on the pulse for this for a little bit, right? Like they've had they've had figured out that you need to have accessible single player content, right? You need to have a flashy story mode. You need to have characters. You need to have like an arcade mode. You need to have something extra like the crypt. They figured that part out. And they've also got a monopoly on some other really good ideas, like the unique dialogue between every character before, during, and after a fight that other fighting games seem hesitant to implement, or, not willing to do to the same extent. Maybe not with voice lines, maybe not as much, right? They've got their finger on the pulse with that. But what Mortal Kombat doesn't convey to you, maybe because Mortal Kombat's gameplay design has always been kind of questionable, they don't really convey to you the mechanics, right? Their story modes usually don't even obey the rules of the game. I mean, you think about Mortal Kombat 9, that game had like tag combat there sometimes. And then, historically Mortal Kombat bosses don't follow the rules of Mortal Kombat either. I mean, the final test of your skill in a Mortal Kombat story mode is usually a boss that doesn't follow the rules of the normal game, right? So it's nonsense. But they've got part of the idea there. And Street Fighter had a decent idea too with World Tour. But my beef with World Tour is that it's a gigantic waste of time, especially because it defaults you to modern controls, which again, I'm not a huge fan of. But the way that the combat works and the things they put in front of you in the World Tour, and I could only get a few hours into it. Maybe it gets infinitely better 10 hours in and I only got 9 hours into it. Maybe. World Tour is a waste of time, because fighting these faceless bots that don't even really put up a fight using a fully custom character, yeah, sure, it's maybe kind of entertaining once you have all the options unlocked, but like starting out, you don't even have any choices in the matter. And it's not really teaching you anything. It's not making you better at the game itself. It's not preparing you to play online. They really missed a step with that. I think they need to offer some kind of story mode that has the cinematics, it has the characters, and they have the single player modes. They have the rewards and the content that can keep someone coming in and make them want to boot the game up and be willing and able to play by themselves. But that gameplay has to amount to something. It can't just be, oh, I beat the Mortal Kombat story mode. Cool, I can uninstall the game, right? Or wow, I spent 60 hours in World Tour and I'm getting stomped online. I don't know anything, right? That's not good. Your modes need to connect by playing the single player content, by playing the story mode, by playing the combo trials. Combo trials need to be practical. And I would say you probably even need to fucking explain why they work sometimes, right? If there's a micro dash involved, you need to tell the fucking player that they need to do a micro dash, right? You need to have a mission mode that doesn't feel like a mission mode. It needs to be, I don't know, some kind of like conquest mode or something that someone goes through and maybe it has story content or it has some other value, but it doesn't feel like work. It feels like something someone can go to and they're willing and able to engage with it, maybe repeatedly, that will help them practically learn these incredibly complex lessons that otherwise they would need to go to YouTube, watch some videos, 3 or 4 videos from different content creators, go into the lab, set up these crazy situations. Another thing Guilty Gear does do that I have to give them credit for, they have certain mission mode trials that are like tips against playing against certain characters. That is also very valuable. That needs to be built in, but again, that should be part of all of this content, right? If you're playing these story modes, if you're playing these mission modes, these should tell you the valuable things you need to know. If I play the story mode or the mission mode in Street Fighter, I should know how to not get stomped out as a noob by E Honda, right? Like I should know, like, oh, E Honda, he's a bitch. I know how to deal with his headbutt, right? That's what it should offer you. And currently they just don't. The single player mode in a game like Street Fighter is meaningless, right? And the arcade modes in a lot of other games, yeah, they're fun and they offer some value with some single player side quests, but they've only ever really been distractions. They've never added real value to the online. If you ask fighting game players, hey, should I practice against the AI? The fucking lab, they'll be like, no, don't waste your time. You'd might as well just hit the lab. Just hit ranked. There's no point fighting the AI. There's no point doing the story mode. There's no point doing these things. And so it all comes back to, well, why the fuck would I play this game at all? If for me, as someone who has experience in this game, every time I go online, I basically am just pulling the lever, rolling the dice on a 50-50 chance of getting stomped out because I'm not willing to put in however much amount of time I can't qualify to fix problems that I also can't exactly quantify. I don't know. I have other things I can do. Why would I? And I think that is the exact question that keeps people from playing fighting games. You know, why would they pick up this strange genre that offers them very little? That, again, usually they can't play with many of their friends. Another issue is that they say, well, I can only play this game with 2 people. I can play this game with 5 or 6 people, right? I think that's one that we need to give less credence to, but something that should be considered. Again, Guilty Gear has a good idea on this. Tokon might be on the cusp of solving this as well. Offer the ability for more people to get involved so you can have an easier time sort of partying up with your friends to play these games, right? Get more people involved. That would help. It just needs, people need to have more incentive. It needs to be more worthwhile for people to boot these games up and play them and to learn them and get comfortable with them in a way that doesn't feel like work. And that should extend at all levels. It should definitely be focused on the newcomers in onboarding people and getting them on board and getting them to the intermediate level. But I think you should definitely cater content to the intermediate people as well. Obviously, at a certain point, it is on people individually to get better. Certainly, you can't handhold people all the way to master, right? But I think in general, these games could do a better job, and partially having a better rank system, fucking Street Fighter, would help so that I'm not constantly getting, I work hard all night, win 50 games, get into Diamond 1, and then I lose 3 games back to back against people who clearly don't fucking belong in Diamond, and I get pushed right back into Platinum, right? Having better rank systems would also help, okay? better placement systems, better rank systems. All of these things would help making fighting games more approachable, right? Making the learning process easier, making it feel more fun, less like work, making it easier for more people to get involved, and creating better rank systems that actually help separate out these massive skill gaps and skill differentials between players so that people actually feel like they're in control of their destiny when they go online, and they don't feel like they're just, hopelessly outmatched every time they boot up because they haven't spent 100 hours in the lab practicing whatever weird niche tactic that last particular opponent who stomped them out happens to use and be really good at, right? So you know, long ramble, but these are just some thoughts that I had on the topic of fighting games because I was playing a little bit tonight, and I played the Tokon beta. Um, I hope someone found this enjoyable, maybe a little informative. But those are my thoughts on the topic at the moment. Thanks for listening.